It's interesting, isn't it? When we talk about these mistakes, we are imagining something going wrong. We took a wrong turn, a failure, a bad decision, right? That's usually what it is. But the most expensive mistakes in the world don't actually usually feel like mistakes at all. As a matter of fact, they feel the most reasonable, the most correct, safe, and approved. They are the decisions that everyone around you would nod at and said, yeah, that makes sense. That's totally what everyone else would do. And that's all the more reason why they're so dangerous. Because no one warns you when you are making these mistakes. You know, because they don't look they don't look self-destructive. They look they they look more mature, okay? And by the time that you realize what it actually costs you, years have already gone by. Lately, time has been feeling very differently for the most of us. And I don't mean in like a dramatic way or end of the world type of way, no. Just in a more heavier, more expensive, like time feels more expensive now. And a year passing by doesn't just feel like a year to us. No, it's feels like a decision. Like every choice that we make now is like it's gonna decide our future type of feel different. And honestly, that weight really changes how we see our past. Okay? Because like suddenly the things that we once called being smart, we quietly, start wondering if they were actually smart or we were just actually avoiding, you know, pursuing what we really wanted to. You know, avoidance, we just good PR. And honestly, I am not an expert. I'm not a life expert. I'm not a YouTube guru or anything. The name's Marisha, if you're new here. I'm someone who has just finally started, who's starting to feel the cost of all the delay that I've been delaying. And if you found this video, most likely you are too. Now, here's the uncomfortable part, okay? The biggest damage in your life doesn't come from the obvious screw ups that you do, you know? It's not the reckless ones or the loud failures, nor the moments where everything collapses. No. The real damage comes from the decisions that look very intelligent at the time, you know? It's the job that you stayed in because, it was stable. You were getting stable pay. It's the version of you that you kept because it was acceptable. That's how it was acceptable by the norm. It's the dream that you have postponed because now isn't a good time, right? Nothing broke. Mm. But maybe that's the problem, okay? Everything just slowly went silent, went quiet. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Now, most people do not ruin their lives on purpose, okay? They just find a way to reason their way out of living their life. I want you to take a look around us, okay? You're gonna notice something very strange. Mm. I don't know if you've noticed it before, but most people around you, most of them aren't stuck because they made reckless decisions in life, or they took a wrong turn. No, they are simply stuck just because they keep choosing the same things over and over again. No, they choose what makes sense instead of what's what's honest, so to speak. And it's subtle, okay? It's subtle. It sounds like, I'm pretty sure you've said it to yourself often, I'll do it later. Let me just be more prepared, okay? Once I feel more confident, once I have, the permission to. But here's the uncomfortable truth that we don't like to say out loud. And that's the fact that no one's gonna come give you permission. The dead ass, that's period. And the longer you wait, the more expensive this waiting is going to be. Now, we do not like to admit that we have very little control over ourselves. So we tend to compensate, okay? We overplan, we chase perfections, we cling to familiarity unconsciously too. We tell ourselves that if we choose the safest option, we can avoid regret, okay? If you don't take the risk, if you don't, jump in without knowing anything, you're not going to have any loss, you know? It makes sense, but it's just delaying it, okay? It's delaying the cost. And Marcus Aurelius wrote, okay, you can leave life right now, okay? Right this instant. This instant. Let that determine what you do and say and think. And that's not like a threat. It's not trying to be morbid, okay? That's clarifying. This play out clearly when I started this whole YouTube thing, okay? You see, I wanted to do it for a long time, okay? For the longest time. And I mean, I really, really wanted to do it. Now, if there's anything I want to do, I wanted to do the YouTube. But I am going to admit that it was very uncomfortable, it was unfamiliar, quietly terrifying. Um, if you are someone who has never really stood in front of camera and talked, you when you're on the camera and sit in front of it, you are going to realize if you're not an outgoing person, you're like an introvert like me, you are gonna quickly realize just how uncomfortable it feels. Okay, because it feels like there's like eyes on you and these intense eyeballs that's looking at you, and you just start losing what you want to say. And when I experienced that, like the first time, when I tried it out, I got scared, I got terrified, and so I delayed. And I told myself, I'm still thinking about it. Let me just plan it more thoroughly. Let me get ready. Let me get the equipment. But in reality, I was choosing comfort and trying to reason with it using logic. But that's how these mistakes work, okay? They don't punish you immediately, like right on the spot when you do it. No, they slowly invoice you, okay? And here's the belief under all of this, at least what I believe those beliefs are, how it made sense in my head while I was experiencing it. It's that safety is somehow way more important than authenticity, that familiarity is wisdom, That if you just stay reasonable enough, life is going to eventually reward you. But contradict those beliefs, it won't. Life does not reward caution, it responds to honesty. And the most expensive mistake a person can make is confusing safe with being alive. Jesus once said, okay, he once said something subtle, but very sharp in Matthew 25, and it goes something like, the servant who hides the talent isn't punished for doing something wrong. He is punished for doing nothing. Now, if there's one thing I want this video to do, or want you to take away, it's this. I want you to feel seen, okay, and realize something very powerful. And that is the fact that you do not need permission to pursue what you want. Most of us are waiting for a signal, for the stars to line up, a green light, a guarantee, a feeling of readiness. But readiness is a myth, okay? Being completely prepared is a myth. Being perfect is a myth. You move first, and then clarity follows. A guy named James put it simply, James Clear, and he said, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your system. And avoidance is a system too." So let's return to the reason why you clicked on this video. What is the most expensive mistake a person can make? It's not failing publicly. It's not being wrong. It's not even embarrassing yourself. No. It's choosing what makes sense instead of what makes you feel honest. That's how the most expensive mistakes are created. It's spending your life instead of trying not to lose, instead of, deciding what's worth risking your life for. But on the bright side, okay, the fact that this question even bothered you means that you're getting somewhere, okay? You're awake. You are not late. You're not broken, okay? You are just at the moment where comfort just stops working for you. And that is not a curse. That in itself is an invitation. You don't need to burn your life to the ground. You don't need to make a dramatic leap. You just need to stop lying to yourself about why you are waiting. The most expensive mistakes do not announce themselves to you. But the moment that you see them, you are no longer required to keep paying. And that's where we start. Quietly, honestly, and now.